Here is exactly what happens to your belly fat when you eat protein first for 30 days. Not what you eat, not how much you eat, just what you eat first. 5 biological stages, each one measurable, each one building on the one before it. Stage 3 is when belly fat starts responding for the first time. Most people never feel it happening, but the research shows exactly what is going on inside. Drop a comment right now. What do you usually eat first in a meal? Carbs, protein, or whatever is closest? Most people think belly fat is a calorie problem. Eat less, burn more, problem solved. But here's what the research actually shows. Belly fat is an insulin problem. Insulin is the only hormone in your body that directly instructs fat cells to store fat. When insulin is high, fat cells lock shut and hold everything in. When insulin is low, fat cells open and release stored fat as fuel. The food you eat does not change this. The order you eat it in does. When carbohydrates enter your stomach first, they break down into glucose almost immediately. Glucose floods your bloodstream. Insulin spikes sharply to clear it. Fat storage mode activates at full strength. When protein enters your stomach first, something completely different happens. Protein creates a physical matrix in your stomach. Carbohydrates eaten after have to move through that matrix before reaching your small intestine. Glucose enters your bloodstream slowly and steadily instead of flooding all at once. A study published in Diabetes Care measured this directly. Same meal, same calories, 2 different eating orders. Protein and vegetables first, carbohydrates last. Post-meal glucose dropped by 29%. Insulin response dropped by 37%. 37% less insulin from the exact same food. 37% less fat storage signal sent to your belly fat cells after every meal. 3 meals a day, 30 days. That compounds into something your body cannot ignore. Stage 1. Days 1 to 3. Nothing dramatic happens on the outside during these first 3 days. Inside is a different story. The first time protein enters your stomach before carbohydrates, specialized cells in your gut called L cells detect it and release GLP-1. GLP-1 is a hormone your body produces naturally. It is also the hormone that expensive weight loss drugs like Ozempic synthetically mimic. When GLP-1 releases early in a meal, before the carbohydrates arrive, it sends a satiety signal to your brain ahead of schedule. Your brain begins registering fullness earlier than it normally would. You eat less of the carbohydrates that follow, not because you are restricting yourself, because your brain received the signal before you finish them. Simultaneously, insulin does not need to spike as high because the glucose load arriving in your bloodstream is smaller and slower. Days 1 through 3, you may not feel dramatically different. But Sarah noticed something on day 2. She had started eating her eggs before her toast at breakfast. By 10 a.m., the mid-morning craving that used to send her to the kitchen every single day was simply not there. Not weaker, gone. She had not changed what she ate. She had not eaten less. The order had changed and the hunger signal that usually followed had not arrived. This is stage 1. Your GLP-1 is releasing earlier. Your insulin is spiking lower. Your fat cells are receiving fewer storage instructions after every meal. Fat is not being burned yet, but the signal to store more is getting quieter. Stage 2. Days 4 to 7. After 4 to 7 days of consistent protein-first eating, something shifts at the cellular level. Your cells begin regaining sensitivity to insulin. Here is what insulin resistance actually means in practical terms. Imagine insulin knocking on the door of a fat cell or muscle cell to deliver glucose. When the cells are sensitive, one knock and the door opens. When cells are resistant, they need 10 knocks before anyone answers. Your body compensates by producing more insulin to knock louder and more often. More insulin means a stronger fat storage signal after every meal. After 4 to 7 days of lower insulin spikes, your cells start responding to quieter knocks again. Your body needs to produce less insulin to process the same glucose load. Less insulin circulating means less fat storage signal running between meals. You may start noticing your energy is steadier through the day. The 3 p.m. crash that used to reliably hit begins to soften, not because you changed what you ate, because your insulin curve has become flatter and more stable. A study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that high-protein meals consumed before carbohydrates improved measurable insulin sensitivity markers within 1 week in overweight adults. 1 week, not months. 1 week of eating in a different order. Stage 3. Days 8 to 14. This is the stage most people never connect to what they are doing at mealtimes. And it is the most important stage on this list. By days 8 to 14, something specific is happening with GLP-1 that goes beyond what occurred in the first week. In stage 1, GLP-1 released earlier in the meal. In stage 3, your GLP-1 response to protein has grown stronger. Each time protein stimulates your L cells, those cells become more responsive over time. The same amount of protein in your meal triggers a larger GLP-1 release in week 2 than it did in day 1. Stronger GLP-1 does 4 things simultaneously. It suppresses appetite more powerfully than any other hormone your body naturally produces. It slows gastric emptying so carbohydrates trickle into your bloodstream over a longer period. It stimulates insulin release only in response to glucose, not on its own, preventing the insulin spikes that occur without it. And it signals your brain that stored fat is available as fuel. That last point is what makes this stage matter for belly fat specifically. When GLP-1 is elevated, your brain begins reading your fat stores as accessible energy rather than locked reserves. A study published in Cell Metabolism found that dietary protein consistently elevated postprandial GLP-1 levels significantly above baseline, with the response compounding over repeated exposure. This is the same mechanism that drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy exploit. They cost hundreds to thousands of dollars per month to synthetically maintain what your body begins producing naturally from a habit that costs nothing. By day 14, many people report that meals are more satisfying than they have been in years. Not because the food changed, because GLP-1 is doing its job more completely. The feeling of genuine fullness that lasts 3 to 4 hours after eating, rather than the hollow fullness that fades in 90 minutes, is GLP-1 working properly. Stage 4. Days 15 to 21. This is when the outside begins to reflect what has been changing inside. Visceral fat, the fat packed around your organs inside your abdomen, is the first fat depot to respond to insulin changes. It has a higher density of insulin receptors than subcutaneous fat. It is more metabolically active, and it is the first to release stored fatty acids when insulin is consistently lower. By day 15, you have had 2 weeks of lower post-meal insulin spikes, 2 weeks of improved insulin sensitivity, 2 weeks of stronger GLP-1 response after meals. The cumulative effect of those changes creates an environment where visceral fat cells begin releasing fatty acids into your bloodstream to be used as fuel rather than holding them in storage. This is why the belly begins to feel different before the scale shows dramatic changes. When visceral fat decreases, the internal abdominal pressure it was creating decreases with it. Your belly becomes softer, less protrusive, less rigid. Clothes fit differently around the waist. David noticed this at day 19. His belt fit differently. Not dramatically, but unmistakably. The scale had moved about 1 kilogram, but his waist measurement had moved 3 centimeters. That gap between scale movement and waist movement is visceral fat responding faster than total body weight suggests. A study published in Obesity found that protein-first eating patterns for 3 weeks produced measurable reductions in visceral fat on body composition scanning independent of total calorie changes. The same food. The same total amount. Measurably less visceral fat from food order alone. Stage 5. Days 22 to 30. By the final week, something has changed that goes beyond the individual measurements. The system is running differently than it was 30 days ago. 5 things have shifted measurably from where you started. Insulin sensitivity has improved. Your body requires less insulin to process the same glucose load than it did in week 1. GLP. One response is stronger and more consistent. Each protein-containing meal triggers a more robust satiety and fat-mobilizing response than it did on day 1. Ghrelin, your hunger hormone, follows a more rational pattern. It rises meaningfully before meals and falls clearly after them. Hunger feels like clean information rather than constant background noise. Visceral fat has decreased. The fat most closely associated with metabolic disease, inflammation, and insulin resistance has responded to the hormonal environment changes. And appetite is naturally lower without willpower being involved. Most people at day 30 report something that surprises them. They are not craving the way they used to, not because they are being disciplined, because their hormonal system is giving them accurate information about what their body actually needs. A systematic review published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2023 analyzed multiple 4-week trials of protein-first eating. The consistent findings across trials included improved insulin sensitivity, stronger GLP-1 response, and measurable reductions in visceral fat compared to control groups eating the same foods in conventional order. The food was identical. The order produced the difference. One rule: protein first. Every meal, that is the entire protocol. Before you touch the rice, eat the chicken. Before you eat the toast, eat the eggs. Before you start the pasta, eat the protein and the vegetables. You do not need to eliminate carbohydrates. You do not need to count anything. You do not need to weigh your food. You need at least 20 to 30 grams of protein in the meal, and you need to eat it first. Eggs, chicken, fish, tofu, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, legumes. Any protein source works. The mechanism does not care which one you choose. Eat most or all of your protein before moving to carbohydrates. Apply this to snacks as well. If you are eating something sweet or starchy as a snack, eat a protein source first. A few bites of Greek yogurt before the crackers, a hard-boiled egg before the fruit. The sequence matters more than the food. Consistency matters more than perfection. You will not eat protein first at every single meal for 30 days. That is not required. Doing this consistently more than 80% of the time produces the full effect. The days you do not are not failures. They are just days where the compound effect pauses briefly before resuming. Here is what happens to your belly fat when you eat protein first for 30 days. Days 1 to 3. GLP-1 releases earlier in every meal. Insulin spikes 37% lower from the same food. Fat storage instructions sent to your belly fat begin quieting down. Days 4 to 7. Insulin sensitivity begins recovering. Your cells respond to lower insulin levels. Energy becomes steadier because your glucose curve has flattened. Days 8 to 14. GLP-1 response grows stronger with each meal. Natural appetite suppression that drugs like Ozempic mimic begins running on its own. Fullness after meals extends by 1 to 2 hours without any change in what you eat. Days 15 to 21. Visceral fat begins releasing stored fatty acids as fuel. Your belly feels different before the scale changes significantly. Waist measurements respond faster than total body weight. Days 22 to 30. The hormonal system has reset. Insulin sensitivity, GLP-1 response, ghrelin patterns, and visceral fat have all shifted measurably from where they started. The momentum continues on its own. One rule produced all of that. Protein first. Every meal, 30 days. Your body does the rest. Start tonight at dinner. Put the protein on your fork before anything else. Come back in 30 days and tell me what changed. Which stage surprised you most today? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. If this changed how you think about the order you eat your food, subscribe to What Science Reveals. Real science explained clearly every single week. And if you want to see how stopping eating after 7 p.m. connects to everything we covered today, that video is right here. The two habits work together as one complete system. See you in the next one.